How are you? Got the beautiful 61 with 272 top end on for Andy's daughter. She's going to like this saw, I think. Now, remember, we didn't want to saddle it with too much compression, but we wanted the right amount. So we are at nearly, I'm going to say really, really close to stock compression with a pop-up. Pop-up let us do some neat things with exhaust timing, which you guys are aware of. There's many things on this build that you do have to change. Carburetor. This is original carburetor. This is a bigger carburetor. See. So this is 272. This is the 61 carb. This carb will run that saw, okay? It just won't reach its full potential. Clutch. I upgraded the clutch on this to a 272. If you see the shoes from here to here, compare it to these ones, you see that there's a lot more shoe on the 272 clutch, which means it'll stick just a little harder. Probably somebody will argue the point, but I know different, so it's the way it is. Okay, you have to use the air intake from the 61, all right? You have to use the 272 bolts. But there's something unusual here. You'll find them bolts are about that much too long. No, don't cut them off. Just get yourself, in this case, it was 3 little washers. You can see where I stacked the washers right here. 3 little washers. That way you don't ring that in there and just ring them right off. Oh, I've done that. I did one last year. I saw, man. I says, now I got to do a thing, which I did a thing. It was all right. He had this muffler sent to me. It's rather unique. What we're trying to do with this, as much as anything, is we want it to be a nice little ring zinger, something fun, but I don't want it saddled with way too much horsepower. This is for a girl. We want it where she's not scared of the saw. We could pipe it. We could do all kinds of crazy things that ups the horsepower. Let's just run with what we got here, okay? The one thing I don't have is that little wire linkage that goes from my throttle lever to my carb. That will be here Monday. So I wait a couple days for that. I did start it, done one heat cycle. Yeah, maybe we ought to try again, eh? Let's just see what it'll do. Okay, gotta open the door. I got that thing pig rich right this second. You know why. And no, I'm not turning it up until I've got several heat cycles on it. But I'm going to tell you something. It's got all the earmarks of something good. Because last time I let that just sit here and idle till it really warmed up. Of course, it's probably loaded up from that, isn't it? They do that, don't they? Well, I'll tell you what, it's warmer today than it's been, but that door opened. Hoo-hoo. I should have opened the other door. I'm really happy with this. Andy, it's a pleasure to do this for your daughter. You know, you're such a good guy. I know that she's got to be the same. And this is something that's going to last her a long, long time. She's really going to be happy with this. But I covered the upgrades to these. You have to do... the 61 was never designed to put this top end on. In fact, I don't even think they had the 272 figured out yet at this time. These are fairly old, but you know they're just a little saw. I mean, they're just a cute little saw. I really like these saws, actually. I've got one right up here on the shelf here. It's my own. See that with a white top? Right. Oh, gotta go there. Oh, it's like cutting hair right there. That one. That's mine. That's a white top. This is a black top. Well, kind of gray, you know. But this has been a labor of love. This has been a joy to build. I can't wait to get it in some wood as soon as we can. As long as we don't get no more snow, and this is going to melt next week, we're going to be running saws. And so there'll be about 8 or 9 of you that's going to get saws right after we run them. I got to cut about 5 quart of wood run that many saws, but I'll do it. I need wood. I'm going to tell you that right now. These weren't, back in the day, logging saws. They were just a good firewood saw. You could cut smaller softwood with them. This saw now, it'll run a 32-inch bar all day long. I know that, if that's what you want to do. I think this one would be a good one for a 24-inch and leave it on there. It would be just perfect for it. It really would. Of course, we got to do several heat cycles. Get that wire cable, that wire throttle on this. Well, you know what? You want to pull the trigger. It doesn't work. But it will. It will. There were several things I had to get out of my own little trick basket that I have for spare parts. I'll tell you what one of them was this mount. Okay, I had to put this. This is one that I had laying around because the original mount, the cylinder had studs on it, you know, so it mounted right on the studs and them upper holes there. This is kind of I think this is a 268 mount. It's a universal kind of deal, like an early 268 maybe. It might be 266, I don't know. But, so that's where we're at with it. Logging. I told you I'd tell you a story, didn't I? So it's story time. Logging back in the day, of course I was about 70 pounds, 75 pounds lighter than I am now. I was awful strong. Still am for a busted up old man like I am. I still do a lot. I'm just not very fast at it. But I'm going to tell you, there was about 2-3 weeks a year that was really nice logging. It was like 50 degrees, sunny, and everything was fine. That's all you could count on. The rest of the year, you was battling cold or heat. It was just some kind of thing. And wildlife, you dealt with wildlife too, believe it or not. Deep snow. I remember one job up on Myers, up in Avoca, New York. I know some of you guys from up there watch. The snow got so darn deep in the woods. It was only about 10 or 12 inches of snow out on the landing and out in the field, but it kind of dropped off. But the way the wind blew, it filled the woods right full of snow. You get 3 feet of snow. You're wading and tromping to each tree, expending energy. You use the bar of your saw as a shovel just to get down. Now, our oak, all of our hardwood, we have to cut it real low to the ground, real low. That's why we couldn't never use a Humboldt. You'd have to go in the dirt a foot. So we use open face bore cut. So you shoveling around them from one tree to another, and you drop the tree and move, it disappears into the snow in a lot of cases. And you're topping these trees just by feel. When you're razor sharp, uh, we would bore cut down through them, divide them in half, and then you'd tip your bar against the cambium layer so that you never broke through the bark. You was just through that last year's sapwood, and you could feel it was nice and soft. So you wouldn't hit the ground. You hoped anyway. And then you buck it off. Log lay there. During them times, we used to have a lot worse winters than we do now. Other than this one's starting to get my attention, if you want to know the truth. So it's a ebb and flow. It's just the weather changes and it goes back and it changes back to better. And then, so we would have to make sure that we didn't have trees on the ground in the wintertime for the next day or over the weekend, because if it snowed, you couldn't find them. You could not. Skidder operator was standing there looking, it'd slow him up. You had if you remembered where the trees were, you could get away with it. So I would generally leave, if I could find a place in the woods where I could like crisscross like 5 or 6, that's, a hitch. They were good sized trees back then. And sometimes they're still that big, I'd crisscross them so you could find the darn things. And yeah, you don't make a mess, don't crap yourself in, but it works. Yeah, all you got to do is crisscross 2 at a time, or 2 or 3, whatever you can do. Then you had a hitch for morning, because the minute you start cutting, I was a cutter. I run skidder too, but I cut. Everybody liked me cutting. I like cutting. It'd get right down to where I remember on that job up there, it got down just below 0 nicely. And during the day, and it was 15 below at night. Oh my goodness sakes, you tarp the skidder, get your generator out, get your salamander out, sit in the truck for about an hour while you're charging the batteries at the same time you got that salamander running underneath there to get that oil pan warmed up so oil would roll the motor then. And most of the skidders we had that we run either had a 353 Detroit or 453. So they'd start. You had to ether the crap out of them sometimes. But boy, they'd start and they'd just, all day long, run just like a top. And you dealt with the same thing. So wintertime, you had 2 things going on. Short days and a lot of work just to get started. You really did. And then frozen trees. The maple is what I noticed the most. It would freeze. When it gets down to 10 below or better, they really start freezing. You'll hear people say, oh, it's it hit 28 last night. I'm dealing with frozen wood. No, you're not. No, you're not. No. Maple trees, they make sugar, for cripe's sakes. They don't freeze easy, but boy, when they do, they're hard. They're real hard. Right, Eric? Getting them comments, buddy. So, you dealt with that. And then, about the 1st of May, end of April, 1st of May, you get a week that was such beautiful weather, you didn't even feel like working. You wanted to throw sticks at squirrels, but you hustled because you just got through mud season. You can count on somewhere in February, March, and in April, mud right just as deep as you can get in some spots. That slowed you down. So the one that really took the beating was the skidder operator. If he was bucking off the back of the skidder like he's supposed to. Fastest way to put timber out, guys, with a cable skidder, 2-man crew. Boy, his chain was always dull. He'd have to stop and sharpen. Well, you pray to God sometimes that he had to stop and sharpen if he's close to that landing, because he'd be all over you. Skidder operators always push the cutters, and the cutters always did extra to try to stay ahead of them. And you did. And if a good cutter, I'm going to tell you something, and you skidder operators probably know this already, but I know you cutters do, you old school guys like me. If that skidder operator was getting too cocky, and he was all over you, and you was having to wedge a lot of trees, you had to slow him up. So what you do is you leave a couple trees in a hitch that weren't premium. They were kind of oddball out of kilter, so he had to work twice as hard to get them. That'd slow him up. You do that for a couple of hitches, and then you could work. Generally, when he was coming around a ridge, is when that you would have to wedge a lot because the trees would want to kind of go uphill or sidling or something, even though it wasn't real steep. But that's trees grow toward light. This is the way it works. Where they get the most light, that's the direction that they want to lean. So there's a tip for you guys. Where does that tree get the most sun if it's hardwood? That is the direction that tree wants to lean if it leans. You have to learn to read the tree first, but that's quite important. So I think I've told this way back when I first started, but I'm going to tell you something that happened. We had one of them beautiful spring days logging, and it's one of them days we were getting a lot done. We were cranked right up. We were flying. It was just, we tried to get 3 loads a day, triaxle loads. That's what we tried to get. Some days you did, some days you didn't. But we got them more often than we didn't. Well, the skidder operator stopped the skidder, and I was looking at him, and he just sitting still. Well, whenever the skidder stopped, or you know something might be wrong, especially if he stopped more than 5 minutes, you know. He ain't just taking a leak or grabbing a sandwich or something going on. Sure enough, skidder operator's right there, and there is this brand new baby fawn, the cutest thing you ever seen. And he's sitting there, and that little fawn's trying to suck on his fingers. And he's all, ain't it cute? And I says, man, you better get away from that little baby. Why? I said, that mama will kill you. She won't like you. She catches you. Oh, nah, she ain't around. I said, you believe me? That little guy ain't a day or two old. That's all he is. He's still wobbly. Boy, they get right up and go pretty quick, though, don't they? Them little baby deer do. So Dave, he didn't want to believe me. I said, Dave, you're on your own, buddy. I'm not hanging around. Boy, all of a sudden, I turned to walk away, back to where my saw was, and we heard this blast. Boy, people think that bucks are the ones that snort. They're not. They're doe do. They're the ones that alert everybody. And you always get one that does it. Well, this mama, she was hot. She let a bet. She started charging. Well, that skidder operator, boy, he forgot all about that little fawn. He jumps right up on that skidder. That's a good thing he did. They'll jump right on their hind legs, and they'll just bat at you with their front feet. Yeah, I seen one of my cousins take a beating from a doe, and he actually was only between the doe and her little baby. And he took quite a little beating, but he got behind a tree and got away. Oh, skidder operator's like, whoa, I want to deal with that. So he went down, got his hitch. Well, I'd worked myself along the ridge line. We'd been cutting some oak and then got into a little bit of shagbark hickory. That's where good axe handles come from, that stuff. Really is. Pig nut's pretty good. It's still a hickory. Smooth, though. So I get into some pine. And these were great big pine. They were marked to cut. I really suspicion they were hollow. You don't know till you bore. Well, this one was kind of a little in the center, but it was big enough tree with still good saw logs. There wasn't a limb for 60, 70 feet. I mean, they were tall suckers. They were. So I tipped that tree over. Well, it rotated just a little bit. Well, it pulled a little fiber, a little on the stump. You don't leave that. Somebody might get hurt on that. Plus, it don't look good. When the foresters come through, they don't want to see none of that. So I turned to cut that. Had the saw just like this, and I'm going to cut that off on that stump. All of a sudden, I just caught some movement out of the corner of my eye. And I'll be darned if that wasn't a frickin' bobcat. But it was a big one, and he was pissed. He was mad. He was up in that tree. Well, them big old pines like that, when they're falling through oak and stuff or hemlock, they don't fall very fast. Boy, he's running up that tree. I didn't even have time to react. I didn't. That joker hit me in my right shoulder and my back, bam, and bounced off of me and run off. And boy, what a day, you know. Here it is, the most beautiful spring day you ever seen. And Dave darn near gets messed up by a doe that's mad. I get a bobcat freaking cranked right up. What's next? Well, I'll tell you what's next. The sun was up behind me. I went, 4 or 5 trees, and I caught one. And same thing, I was getting ready to trim things up just a little bit on the butt, and I put my Spencer tape, like one I got laying over there, in the end of the log, and I was going to start measuring out. They were looking for 16 footers, and then obviously 21s. But all of a sudden, something hit my hard hat, my cotton helmet, and hit my shoulder. And I'm trying to look up, and it's right in the sun. There's these black things, I thought it was bats. And they just bounced all over me, or landing all around. So what the heck? It was flying squirrels. Yeah, flying squirrels. They were up in that tree. It was hollow up at top pretty good. In fact, the top, it was about 16 inches in diameter, but it was way up. And there was a nice big hollow spot in there. Well, these flying squirrels, I don't know if they were in a tree or just in the limbs or what, but boy, they come out of the trees next door to it and stuff. And, it was amazing. Well, I found a little baby, one of he's about, he was weaned good, but I thought he's hurt. He was dazed. So I put him in a bucket. It was close to 2 o'clock, so I knew we'd be leaving about 3:30. I put him in the bucket. I brought him home. Well, we had this great big cage, okay? And it was in the house. We'd rescued an owl and got him healed up and turned him loose. But the cage, that was a week or two before. The cage was still in the house. I hadn't bothered to drag it out. So I come home, that flying squirrel. And Barb was still at work. She worked at the Hornell High School in the cafeteria. Yeah, lunch lady for a long time, too. Kids loved her. So I put this flying squirrel in that cage. And I put some seeds in there and an apple and a little water and stuff for him. Well, I was helping somebody at Woodhull Raceway with an engine that I'd built for him. And I was going over to early, and I did. I got there early to the pits. Well, I didn't bother leaving a darn note. Well, let me tell you something. Things got real fast, really fast, real. Now, we also had a pit bull, and I never let him know he's a pit bull. He was just a darn good house dog. His name was Emmett. I loved him right to death. Good dog. And he was just awful pleasant. Just really was. Very smart, too, I will tell you that. Play tricks on you. So, anyways, Barb comes home from work. And we had, behind the stove, I had this great big burn beam for a mantle. I built this special room just for relaxing. It had 10 different varieties of oak for hardwood flooring that I produced myself. And we'd taken pine slabs and run them through table saw. So it made like fake log siding inside. And I left it rustic. Well, I had an Ashley wood stove heater. And above that, I had a horse-drawn rake wheel hung from a chain. And that's what I would put my boots in upside down, my boot liners, gloves, my clothes above that stove to dry. And, but that mantle was really beautiful. Barb looked in that room, and she looked because she checked the fire, and she was going to get her cup of coffee and sit down, and she seen something sitting up on that mantle. She went in there to look, and behind the picture, something like that. That flying squirrel. Well, guess what? She thought it was a mouse or a rat or some darn thing. I don't know where she got that from, but she went and got the broom. And she's trying to clobber this flying squirrel. Well, that got that pit bull all wound up because mom's going to kill it. He's going to help her. And that thing it went all around the house. They couldn't get near it. Could not. It disappeared. Absolutely disappeared. Finally, she seen it. Yeah, after about an hour or so. And yeah, I had a talking to when I got home, didn't I? I'll tell you about that in a minute. And she recognized what it was, some kind of a little squirrel or chipmunk. She didn't know what it was exactly, but boy, she had an awful time. She had to tie the dog out because the dog wasn't going to quit. He's going to get it. No, Mom wants that gone. I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna get rid of that thing. So she left it alone. Well, when you go racing circle track and you're helping these guys, you don't get home till about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So I drag it in. And boy, she was waiting up for me. She never did that. And she was waiting up for me. She says, Harvey, she says, we have a critter in the house. Do you know anything about that? What do you mean? I don't know what it is. It looks a little like a chipmunk, but I don't think it. Oh, it's a flying squirrel. Why'd you bring home a flying squirrel? I told her the story. Well, she kind of, she says it ain't in the cage. She says it's in here somewhere. So I sat there and I waited for a little bit and I seen the darn thing. And I managed to grab a hold of him, put him in that cage. I seen where he got out. I was right beside the door, so I fixed that at the same time. And, that darn little flying squirrel, he became a member of the family inside of a week. Barb would sit by that stove in her chair, and my chair was opposite. Like I said, this was a relaxed room, and it was nice and warm, and we had really comfortable chairs in that room. Well, she'd lean her head against that cage, right? Well, that little flying squirrel loved Barb right to death because she was always giving him little treats and talking to him. We called him Henry. And he'd reach his little paws through that cage and he'd pull out her hair. He'd pull on her hair and he'd get it through the cage and he'd sit there and stroke her hair and he'd make these little chirping noises. He just loved doing that. A friend of mine moved to Florida after we had him about 2, 3 months. He says, Harv, he said, I got an older cockatiel. He says, he's a nice bird. He can talk, but he says you can't really understand him. He says, I need somebody to take him in, but yeah, sure. Well, Barb says, why'd you drag that thing home? I says, he'll be company for Henry. Oh, no, they're not going to get along. I put him in that cage. And, something? That darn cockatiel and that flying squirrel got along swimmingly. The flying squirrel took the bottom of the cage, cockatiel took the top. If one got near the other one, they just looked at each other. There was no threatening or nothing. They just like, hey, we're both animals or something. Very few times does things like that really happen. But I'm going to tell you what, them were the days, weren't they? They were. They were the days for me. There was a lot of times I made real money. There was a lot other times, just as many, I barely could buy a jar of peanut butter. Work your butt off all week. You might get some bills paid, you might not, because things went bad. So what you had to do, you had to get efficient. You had to learn to really sharpen your saw, maintain your equipment, maintain the skidders, work together with the skidder operators, a 2-man crew, so things really clicked. Everybody made money then, everybody. You at least could make a living. And the problem with logging always was, you never, ever, you'd save money, you never dared spend much, because you knew bad times were coming. You really did. And they did, they came. But you don't go logging unless you have excellent problem-solving skills. I'm going to warn you of that. And your chainsaw skills, they'll come to you. They will. Learning how to sharpen, they'll come to you. But you better freaking have a head on your shoulders. There's no such thing as a dumb logger. I'll warn you of that. He might have a stupid look on his face and look like a Neanderthal, But I'm gonna warn you, he's smart, or he can't do that work. Tim Barton will tell you all about that. Won't you, Tim? It's a tough life, but what else would you rather do? Nothing. Nothing. That's right. Nothing. That's it. Guys, it's Friday. Have a good evening. Spend time with your kids and your family and kick back and just enjoy yourselves. Okay? You can take that right to the bank. That's worth doing, believe me. Okay, that's it, guys. Goodbye.